So I came into the field of religious studies from theology, as a matter of fact. That was my first training. Lost interest in any kind of metaphysical issues and came into the field really from a point of view of looking at the methodology for the study of religious phenomena. For the most part, the field had emerged out of historical and philological studies in the 19th century. And didn't come into contact with the mature sciences, whether biology, psychology, sociology, until perhaps the late 70s or 80s. In between, people approached the study of religion from a kind of phenomenological point of view. And what they tried to do then was, in terms of reading texts, in terms of looking at people in their interactions in real-time situations in religious communities, is to try to understand what religion was from the inside out. So it was called the phenomenology of religion. Could we really understand these people? The focus was not on explanation. And I think the big transformation in the study of religion in the last 2 to 3 decades has been looking for explanations of why people behave in the way that they do relative to supernatural beings. That includes both looking at whether or not we can find the origins of religiosity that allowed for the development of social institutional religions as we know them today, and to explaining individual types of religious behaviors in terms of categories of psychology and more scientifically oriented with respect to the cognitive capacities of the human mind that were developed in an evolutionary account of how Homo sapiens came to be what they are. So it's a major transformation in the way the study of religion has been done in the period of time that I've been in the field. I don't like to use the word religion very much. I like to talk about religious behavior because other sciences study political behavior, economic behavior. Religion is too vague a term and too broad a term. Do we need to look at experimental accounts of human behavior? I think it helps to clarify just how people do make decisions with respect to religious events, religious behavior in their own life and that of others. And so I think the experimental material tells us about the operation of the human mind that we can then apply to the study of particular religious phenomena. There are a whole range of behaviors, of course, that people will focus experimental attention on. It doesn't necessarily have to be specifically religious behavior. It's just to find out how the ordinary capacities of the human mind operate, whether in economic behavior, political behavior, or religious behavior. And so this will either help us test theories that have been given by philosophers and phenomenologists and theologians to see whether or not the kinds of claims they've made about religion are on the mark, and to test them, but also to provide evidence for the kinds of behaviors that we actually see in the field, whether in terms of more archaic religious traditions or in terms of the way people behave in modern religious communities. Now, I think there are specific benefits with the experimental kind of work that goes on. It gives you a precise kind of understanding of particular behaviors or beliefs. For example, dealing with children and what kinds of views that they have, let's say, in terms of the afterlife. So thinking of experiments that Jesse Bering has done with children in terms of, an alligator that eats a mouse, Now, how do they feel about that poor mouse? Where is it? What is it feeling now? Can it eat? Does it get hungry? Well, it doesn't get hungry, but it has certain feelings. It misses its brothers and sisters, or it misses its parents. And so what you find is that children have a kind of dualistic worldview, and there is a life after death. this provides you with a kind of understanding that might help you explain adult human behavior with respect to religion, namely that there's a kind of common dualistic worldview, that there is matter and there's spirit, and when someone dies, they're not totally dead. And so does this give one some kind of insight in terms of why adults believe the same kind of thing in terms of their religious commitments and the like? So there is that kind of experimental work that is being done that tells people there's more than one world. And that's what religion is about, is that there's more than one world. So it may say something about an innate attachment or connection to religious believings in communities throughout the world. Of course, that requires interpretation in terms of applying it to earlier views about how religious people behave. But it does give you an insight that wasn't there earlier in terms of simply reading religious texts or looking at behaviors of people in communities of religious belief today. So the experimental work is adding a portion that has not been there in the period of time that I spent my life in terms of the study of religion. It's a massive shift. It provides you a new kind of evidence. And that's what's so exciting about the field today that wasn't there when I was a young man, given you know, the people that are studying religion today. They have a set of resources today that we never had. Well, the relationship is one of tension. There are a lot of people who have been in the field a long time, who know how to study texts, who are historians, who are phenomenologists and want to get to the feel of religion that people who are religious have. And they think that you know, the scientific kind of approach to religion eviscerates, takes out the very heart of what religion is all about, namely feeling encounter with gods or supernatural beings. So at this point, the relationship between the two is still very tense. What is the actual relationship in terms of methodologies for the study of human phenomena? People who are engaged in that find there to be a complementarity. So what you might explain at one level in terms of people's intentions, because I'm a human individual, I know what intentionality is. I have wishes, desires, goals, aims. And we look at other people and we can predict their behavior in terms of the kinds of intentions we think they have. So we see them in situations of worship, and we will draw certain kinds of conclusions about their needs, their dependence upon a supernatural power, and one will describe that, write it up, but that doesn't really tell us much in terms of why they engage in this, except in terms of their own beliefs. Now we can begin to explain their beliefs in terms of the cognitive capacities of the human mind. So why are there gods? Well, maybe because in terms of our evolutionary history, there was the organisms who had a hyperactive agency detection device, for example, would have been very anxious in terms of anything that's around them that might be dangerous to them. And so those children would run to their parents and be protected. It may only have been a noise around them, but they immediately presumed that it was something that might be dangerous to them. Now, children who did that repeatedly would live longer than those who didn't worry about the snap of the twig in the forest, right? So they live long enough to pass on their genetic material to the next generation. And so people then who, you know, human communities have this hyperactive agency detection device. And now when they are in adulthood and can't resolve certain kinds of problems, what do? Well, they might, in fact, generate conceptions of supernatural beings, beings that are more powerful than human persons are. And that if you rely on them, you can solve certain kinds of problems that you couldn't solve otherwise. So from that point of view, you see the kind of explanations that can be provided that aren't provided in terms of the traditional historical, textual, and phenomenological approaches to the study of religion. It started very slowly. The early students of this field, Tom Lawson, Robert Macaulay, looking at ritual practice, for example, from this cognitivist kind of approach. That didn't immediately explode things into a cognitive science framework. The major associations that govern the study of religion in North America, for example, the American Academy of Religion, there was no sympathy for this kind of approach there. So the group was very small. There was no research money to begin with for this kind of approach to the study of religion. This has all changed in the last 2 to 3 decades. When I think in terms of the number of universities that have research units, in addition to the traditional forms of teaching and individual research, this is a transition between night and day. How much progress has been made in terms of this approach, in terms of explaining religion in a holistic fashion? I think the jury is still out. We won't really know for a number of years yet, I think, as to whether or not we'll find the origins of religion or religiosity, or whether the explanatory accounts will actually be persuasive not only to ourselves, but also to the people who still study religion in the more traditional fashion. So I think it shows a lot of promise. I think it still needs a great deal more work. Well, I think LEVYNA, like the other institutions in Oxford or Belfast or Aarhus, and now British Columbia in Canada, I think LEVYNA is breathing new life into the study of religion for the generation of students that are coming up now. They are not simply looking at texts. They're not simply trying to, from a kind of personal empathetic point of view, understand religion as to how those people feel and then describe that. What they're actually doing is looking at a number of components of how the human mind works and how that might be very relevant to understanding how the religious human mind works. And so the range of experiments that are being done in terms of the embodiment of religion, or in terms of issues of sociality and pro-sociality, in terms of issues of the evolutionary development of religion from things like having a hyperactive agency detection device. So looking at it from the point of the evolutionary history of the human mind, the capacities that are there now and how they function with respect to religion, what religion can contribute to human life or social life, are new issues that were not dealt with when I was a graduate student or a young scholar in the field. So I think LEVYNA, like the other groups, are able to bring a whole new set of questions to the study of religion. And they can do it because they have finally been able to tap into resources that allow experimental work to be done. I mean, this is expensive, it's time-consuming. It's not the kind of individual research that my generation was involved in libraries, and so it's bringing a whole new shape to the study of religion. It shows a great deal of promise. There are questions that have been resolved with respect to religion that we didn't have resolutions to earlier. But as I said earlier, it still has a long way to go. But more research money needs to be pumped into this, into LEVYNA and the others. The most important parts that LEVYNA plays is in association with the other groups that are getting the same kind of research money. So what's happening today is that there's a kind of integration of research on several continents, in several countries, where people are integrating the materials that they get. They're sharing it in a way that we didn't share earlier, which means that there's a kind of synergy that comes from that. And LEVYNA is playing a very important role in that. It has connections now, again, not only with Belfast and Aarhus and Oxford, but is building a strong relationship also with the movement in Canada. And it's that sharing of research methodologies, sharing of the results of the research that it's actually a kind of cumulative effect that you see in physics or chemistry or biology, where we're not working against each other, we're not working in ignorance of each other, but we're actually beginning to get a cumulative effect of results from the experimental research that is telling us a good deal about human behavior in general, but how it applies to religion becomes much more forceful than it has in the past. So I think, at least for me, the excitement of LEVYNA is that kind of synergy that is coming in relationship to the work around in other places in the world. What LEVYNA brings to it is the experimental anthropology research work that's being done in Mauritius. I mean, they have a field station, they have access to the archival material in Mauritius, but they're actually working with traditional religious beliefs and practices that they can follow, in real time, and have the kinds of questions that they raise for the participants, the religious participants in these ritual practices, respond to the questions. They can see how they behave, and cover a range of issues that we can't do in the classroom, we can't do in the library, we can't do simply in conference work. That there's actually an anthropological field station. This is something quite new. None of the other four groups that I've mentioned have done this, and of course that field research station will be made available to students who are working in these other countries as well. So that's a very peculiar and very important addition that LEVYNA provides to this whole system. I wish I could speak Czech and come here and lecture. I mean, I find Brno and Masaryk University one of the most exciting places in the study of religion in the world today. It's a very young department. It did not have the kind of religious background that most of the departments of religious studies elsewhere in the world, in North America, in England, in Denmark. There was always a kind of theological background to it. That doesn't seem to be here at all. That the scientific approach has been has had a much easier time emerging in Masaryk than it has had anywhere else. So Professor Luther Martin and I have been involved with Czech scholars for at least 20, 25 years. First of all, when they would come to University of Vermont, and we have taken an interest in the study of religion in the Czech Republic ever since then. And unlike the theological orientation that we see in Prague, one doesn't see here. So this is an exciting new development. We have students here who come, that is, when we listen to the students from Masaryk University, we don't hear the kinds of questions that we get from students in North America. They're genuine scientific questions. They want to look for explanations of religious phenomena. They're not asking about, how can religion be meaningful to me? Those are the kinds of questions I get from the students I have in Canada. So it's a different atmosphere entirely. And I think, there were some of us who really wanted the International Association for the History of Religions to bring their next big congress to the Czech Republic. Although we are old and wise, they didn't take our advice. So it's going to Germany. But that's the excitement that we feel about the Czech Republic in Masaryk. And with LEVYNA, that just adds another addition to it. That is a research unit that allows the students to get into the field, to do experimental work, and to see how that contributes and can change the vision that has been there in terms of the earliest forms of the academic study of religion. So it's really quite an exciting place. The relationship of the sciences to society at large is only primarily fulfilled if we, for the period of our research, ignore society. I'm serious about that. I think that if we focus too much in terms of what the contribution we can make to society is there, we will begin to skew the research so that we help society. There are many people, for example, that I deal with who say, if you study religion in this way, you might undermine people's faith in religion. I say, well, that's not something that I want to take into consideration because that might be a byproduct. It's certainly not my aim or goal. On the other hand, if we understand religion properly, and this does suggest that religion is not a rational, reasonable, helpful thing in society, that's something that the political scientists might want to deal with, or the politicians might want to deal with, but that's not my problem as a scholar of religion, and I don't think it should be something that we lay on our students. That we really should, I mean, physicists don't worry about, if I find this kind of causal connection, what will happen in society? That's for other people to worry about. The university is a unique creation. I mean, it's concerned only for gaining knowledge for the sake of knowledge alone, and that's what I think the student of religion has to concern himself or herself about. What is true about the origin of religion? What is true about the way religion has functioned in society? Why has it functioned differently in Western European and Anglo-American societies after the Enlightenment? Has that been beneficial or not? It doesn't matter whether it has been or hasn't. We need to know if it has and why it has, and then leave the work up to the politicians and political scientists, economists, and policymakers. Students of religion should stay students of religion, in my judgment. If you think in terms of the radical transition in terms of the face of all of our societies now, very few of us are pristinely, Czech or Canadian or British. We live in multicultural, multinational, multi-religious societies. One of the things that I think we can recognize in terms of the study of religion is that although one wants to give freedom of religion, let's say in any democratic kind of context, that freedom of religion suggests that you will have to have an approach to the common issues in a society that transcend religion. That is, if in fact religious traditions are all different and are necessarily different from each other, then the public realm in which we make our political decisions about how to govern a nation or a society must actually exclude the possibility of bringing in religious beliefs, religious convictions in terms of the debate. If I think in terms of the United States of America, for example, the huge battle over abortion with the religious people on one side and the secular, atheistic Democrats on the other side. I think that what this multiplicity of religions tells us is that you really need to find a basic ground on which all people can agree, and a kind of conversation, a framework for conversation that can allow a convergence of opinion. And if religious people bring in, and atheistic people bring in their atheistic or religious convictions into the conversation, agreement is highly unlikely. So I think philosophers like Rawls, John Rawls, in terms of looking at, what is a common kind of rationality that does not undermine people's religious beliefs, but allows people with different religious beliefs to have a common conversation. I think the study of religion can contribute to that a great deal.